So let's say a few things now. Let me finish up with a few things about NEON in particular as you think about access to NEON infrastructure. At the core here is going to be NSF's merit review process. It's going to be central in order to ensure that there is a fair, competitive, transparent, and in-depth review. So the NEON research proposals will indeed be merit reviewed. And the logistics and maintenance will be managed by NEON. So this is a central facility. NEON is certainly going to be collecting information from many, many places, but it is a centralized facility to deal with centralized large-scale problems. Problems that are continental in scale, indeed even global in scale, as we go ahead from here. And so as with other scientific infrastructure, you've got telescopes and ships, the facility and its taskable infrastructure, those experiments are going to be accessible and shared by the research community. And scheduling is going to be managed by a collaboration between NSF and NEON Inc. as we go ahead from here. We're going to think about this collaborative environment going ahead on NEON. Next slide then. What we're going to do is to think about NEON as sort of a first big investment as far as large-scale biology is concerned. And we want to begin to think about macrosystems biology. So we're preparing a solicitation by that title of Macrosystems Biology. And you can see some of the things that will be highlighted. It'll be research on systems at regional to global scales. Competition, that competition is going to promote quantitative, interdisciplinary, systems-oriented research, complex interactions with climate, land use, invasive species at regional to global scales. But it can be all the way from the molecular level to the global climate change level. So this solicitation is in the works right now and should be out once we get it through the processing at NSF. So this is a sense of how we're beginning to prime this community, this next level of analysis as far as biology is concerned in terms of macrosystems thinking. The next image. This is also consistent with what the Advisory Committee for Environmental Research and Education at the National Science Foundation is arguing. So they just released a report 10 days ago. So again, I'll point to my colleague Margaret Leinen in the back. Margaret and I worked together on first the red report and then the blue report. Now we have a green report. We're working our way through the color wheel with the Advisory Committee for Environmental Research and Education. And this group pulls out three areas: systems thinking, this whole notion of tipping points. If you haven't seen the, I think it's Schiefer, Carpenter, Sugihara paper in Nature, it's a fascinating analysis of tipping points, the mathematics associated with them. And it's not just tipping points as we think of them in ecological systems, but they're looking at them also in economic systems and geoscience systems, and seeing that the same math can apply in these different kinds of areas of scholarship. So I talk about one biology / one science in terms of, are there these principles that extend across levels of analysis in the biological sciences, but even beyond the biological sciences into different areas of science. And these folks are really knocking on that door in terms of the math that could be used to describe these transitional phenomena in different sorts of systems. It's a really fascinating paper, and it's at the heart of this new green report, which is up on NSF's website. Just go to ACERE, and the PDF is there. Hard copy should be available within a week, they tell me, a week to 10 days. If you send an email to Michelle Kelleher at NSF, she'll be sure you can get a hard copy. And the next image then, it raises this report, the whole question of not only the science as a tipping point, but the degree to which the way the science is done, the community in general, are we at a tipping point in terms of our basic understanding, but also the importance of science in terms of societal decisions. So community readiness then revolves around you folks here. The kinds of organizations that you've created with NEON that has both the authority and the stature to make the case to the community that the science is changing. NEON is a manifestation of that in terms of these large-scale questions that won't be solved at the square meter level, the way Clements was hopeful of solving things. They won't be solved even at the tens of acres or hectares level, or even perhaps around a single city. These problems really have to do with the way in which larger domains are linked together and the degree to which predictions about how ecosystems are changing in the eastern part of the United States has to include in that analysis, in that final equation, some part of what's happening in the western part of the United States and even in China. And how do we begin to write those algorithms, write those models in a way that we can make the predictions going forward from here? It's going to take visionary leadership, which is represented in this room here. It's going to take terrific stewardship and responsibility, because the nation is going to entrust you folks with hundreds of millions of dollars to build out the system, along with tens of millions of dollars to operate that system. You will be the stewards of that system. It is an immense responsibility. It's one that you've already agreed to take on and have shouldered really well over the past several years. But the nation will be looking to you in terms of that stewardship and that responsibility. That will depend upon networks. It will depend upon partnerships and collaborations and collaboratory environments that really haven't existed up to now. You're going to have to create them. You're going to have to build on what you've already got and create even new and more interesting ones going ahead from here. Get yourselves involved in outreach, which is already happening, and it's going to require innovative training. So in the next image, I open that up. We're going to have to really think about training students to be leaders of these kinds of activities, these larger scale activities, because NEON won't be the first of them, either in the ecological sciences or other areas of the sciences. There are others that are on the drawing board already. There's this whole activity called Project Science, which is a way to go and begin to think about how these projects work, which is a whole other way of thinking. This is just not square meter science. You really have to think differently in order to do this kind of science. And so we're thinking about leadership fellows kinds of programs, graduate fellows, NEON Seeds kind of program, analogous to what ESA already has. The importance of social networking. This is once again where it's going to, as I said to the LGR folks last week, 10 days ago, when I showed the slide about incumbents really create the future, I spoke to the graduate students and the undergraduates who were in the room. It's the graduate students and the undergraduates who are going to create this room. It's the ones who actually Twitter, unlike I. It's the ones who have all these Facebook pages and social networking, unlike myself. And they're the ones that we're going to have to bring along, giving them all the wisdom that comes with the kinds of knocks that we've taken, the kinds of experience that we have, the intellectual experience that we have. Give it to them, but let them then go with it. They're the ones that will create the future, and that's going to depend on new kinds of curricula. We're going to have to think that through, and even interinstitutional degrees. As you think about a network, how can you then think about hooking together institutions in a way that, in fact, you wind up with a degree potentially from multiple places?